is not a physician, but the administrator of the hospital. Dr. Gordon suggested I give you a call and said you'd be more than happy.
He's also the only person to have it.
His family. Returning to the West Coast tomorrow for about 2 weeks. Georgia law requires the house doctor on duty be a full practitioner or a specialist. Dr. Gordon suggested you had a great deal of free time. You'd be more than happy to cover the shift in an administrative capacity. There's no way I could do that. Why not? Well, I'm not licensed to practice medicine in the state of Georgia, just the state of California where I hold my residency. All the red tape for 2 weeks. No red tape. We'll bring it before the medical review board tomorrow morning. They'll issue a temporary certificate. You can start tomorrow night. Now, being one hates to pass up a challenge, I couldn't have it. So I went up to the hospital. During my entire stay there, no one ever doubted for a second that I was not the doctor, and I left when the doctor returned. I did pass the bar in the state of Louisiana, not in 2 weeks as the movie implies, but in 2 months by taking the 2-month prep course for the bar. Actually, at the time, Louisiana did not require a law degree to take the bar. Louisiana practiced their law under the French Napoleonic Criminal Code of Procedure. I took the bar, passed the bar, and went to work for then Attorney General P.F. Grimion in the Civil Division of the State Court, where I spent about a year, only on my own, no one the wiser. I resigned and left. A lot of people say, you know, it's not so much the people you impersonated as a teenage boy as it is the crimes you perpetrated as a teenage boy. Well, I did a lot of things that had just never been done before, so they got a lot of attention. I was walking down a Chicago street one day counting $5 $20 bills in my pocket. As I was counting them, I passed the front door of a bank. There was a sign in the window that said, "Open a checking account." So I thought to myself, I'll go in this bank, open a checking account with this $100. I'll give them this phony Pan Am ID for identification. In 2 weeks, this bank will mail me 200 printed checks in a box with this name. And with this ID, I'll cash them anywhere. So I walked in, opened the account. New accounts person came back. So here's a receipt for your $100. These are some temporary checks. We'll be mailing you your printed checks in about 10 days. Now, being young, I was always inquisitive. So I noticed you didn't give me any deposit slips. No, sir, they come from the check printer. Be in the back of your checkbook, put in your name, your address, your account number, get them in about 10 days. See. I was just curious, you know, if I wish to make a deposit tomorrow, next week, not a problem. You see the table in the lobby? Has all the forms on it? Just go over there and help yourself to a blank deposit slip. In this box, just write your account number in it. I assigned you. Use those to get your printed one. So I walked over and took a big stack of them off the shelf. Nobody cared. Went back to my hotel. But I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at them on the dresser. So the next morning, I went out and bought what was called the Burroughs 1000 magnetic encoder. Looked like a big green calculating machine. And I magnetically encoded my account number the bank had assigned to me the day before on the bottom of every one of these blanks. I then went back to the bank, put them on the shelf in the lobby, and everyone who came in put their check in my account. I was at the Logan Airport in Boston. I was trying to catch a flight. It was about 11:45 at night. I ran out to the airport. The whole airport was closing down. Rent-a-cars, gift shops, ticket counters. I walked up to the ticket counter. Excuse me, you're closing the airport? Actually, the airport lies in the heart of the city. Comes under the government's noise abatement control program. We have no jet operations after midnight. Next flight out is at 6:30 in the morning. So I sat down wondering what to do. I noticed they were all sticking their cash and receipts in these big bank bags. Then they'd zip them closed, lock them, put them under their arm, walk around the counter and down the hall to the bank that was at the terminal. They'd stick their key in the night box, open it, drop the bag down the chute, make sure it went all the way down, closed it, locked it. One right after the other, Hertz, Avis, Delta, Eastern, Dobbs House, dropping the bag. I didn't give this a lot of thought, but I came back to the airport the next night about 11:45. I had rented a bank guard's uniform from a costume store in Boston, hung a beautiful sign over the night box, said night box out of order, please leave all deposits with guard on duty. Everyone did.
Oh my God.
I was the nervous one sitting there going, what the hell can a box be out of order? I mean, that's like a mailbox. Of course, like any criminal, sooner or later you get caught, and I was no exception to that rule. I was actually arrested just once in my life at the age of 21 by the French police in a small town in southern France called Montpellier. The French police arresting me on an Interpol warrant issued by the Swedish police who were looking for me for forgery. When the French government took me into custody on the Swedish warrant, they soon realized I'd forged checks all over France, and they refused to honor the warrant from Sweden. They convicted me of forgery and sent me to French prison. I served my time in a place called the Maison d'Arrêt, the house of arrest, in a small town in southern France called Abagnale. Steven Spielberg told Barbara Walters it was extremely important to me to go back to that prison, to the exact cell Frank was in, and reconstruct it according to the logbooks during his stay there, which he said was a blanket on the floor, a hole in the floor to go to the bathroom, no plumbing, no electricity. He said, amazingly, the book shows that I entered the prison at 198 pounds and left the prison at 109 pounds. When my sentence was over in France, I was extradited to Sweden. I was later convicted in Sweden of forgery and sent to a Swedish penitentiary in Malmö, Sweden. When my prison term was up in Sweden, federal authorities took custody of me and returned me to the United States. Eventually, a United States federal judge sentenced me to 12 years in federal prison. I served 4 of those 12 years at a federal prison in Virginia. When I was 26 years old, the government offered to take me out of prison on the condition I go to work for an agency of the government for the remainder of my sentence or until my parole had been satisfactorily completed. I agreed and was released. This year I'm celebrating 36 years at the FBI, where I've worked and work today for the past 36 years. I make my home actually in Charleston, South Carolina, where I live with my wife of 35 years and my 3 sons. I commute up and down the coast to Washington each week. My youngest son is 28. He graduated from the University of Beijing in China. He went on to get his master's there. He reads, writes, and speaks Chinese fluently. He works for an American company that makes mobile games for mobile telephones in China. My middle son graduated from the University of Nevada in Las Vegas. His degree was in hotel administration. My wife owns a business in South Carolina. He manages that business for her. My oldest boy, 32 now, graduated from the University of Kansas at KU. He went on to Loyola School of Law in Chicago to get his law degree, passed the bar in Illinois, went on to make his dad very, very proud. He's an FBI agent in our counterintelligence unit in Baltimore, Maryland. As many of you know, I had nothing to do with the film because the Bureau did not allow my participation in the film, nor the acceptance of any money or royalties from books, movies, television, or Broadway plays. So I watched it from afar, and there was a great deal of apprehension in the beginning. But in the end, my family and I felt that Steven Spielberg went out of his way not to glorify the things I did, but to simply tell the story about what I did. In the 1-hour special about the making of Catch Me If You Can by Barbara Walters, he said during the closing, I did not immortalize Frank Abagnale on film because of what he did 40 years ago as a teenage boy. I actually chose to immortalize him on film because of what he's done for his country for more than 30 years, unquote. In the end, my family and I were very pleased by the result of the film. Now, needless to say, I get hundreds of emails back in Washington. I had a bunch of them today, which I came from there this morning. I'm heading back there in just a little while, because I know that it must have ran on TV last night. Every time I get those emails, I get somebody tells me, well, Catch Me If You Can was on television last night. And the interesting thing is the emails come from people as young as 8 years old to people as old as 80. And they're writing, not looking for a response, they just feel they need to make a statement. Some write and say, you know, you were brilliant. You were an absolute genius. I was neither. I was actually just a child. Had I been brilliant, I'd have been a genius. I don't know that I would have found it necessary to break the law in order to just simply survive. And while I know that people are fascinated by what I did 40 years ago as a teenage boy, I've always looked upon what I did as something that was immoral, illegal, unethical, and a burden I live with every day of my life, and will until my death. There are many who write and say, well, you know, you were certainly gifted. That I was. I was one of those few children that got to grow up in the world with a daddy. Now, the world is full of fathers. But there are very few men worthy of being called daddy by their child. I had a daddy who loved his children more than he loved life itself. Steven Spielberg would say that the more I researched Frank's youth without the use of Frank, I couldn't help but bring his father into the film through the likes of Christopher Walken. My father was a man who had 4 children, 3 3 boys and